Ladies and gentlemen, this is your final boarding call for the good ship SS Tomorrow.
Today on The Friendly Futurist, another old friend revisited. And welcome back, and as you probably guess, and in celebration of our 5th year anniversary of the good ship SS Tomorrow taking flight, we are going back to revisiting some of our previous guests and ask them how it's all progressing, because you might remember that question I tend to ask at the end of the show: where do you see the world from 5 to 10 years from now? Now, since we launched in 2021 and now it's approaching 2026, I think it's now appropriate time to ask how it's all progressing. Is your predictions coming true? Now, today's guest is Nathan Rhodes from Intium, based in New South Wales. And if you want to go back to the original episode, check out Season 14, Episode 6, released in January 2025, when we last spoke to Nathan at the end of 2024. We did ask about creating a jobs bonanza in regional Australia, which I think is very important, because that's where most of the sunshine is, there's most of the winter, there's untapped geothermal, for example, in the outback, particularly in Queensland. So it's very important to ask this, because this is where all the action's going to happen. It's not going to happen in the big cities. It's not going to happen in Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, so on and so forth. So we invited Nathan back to have a chat, see how it's all progressing, and he's coming up after the break. And welcome back, and we're continuing our catching up on our guests, because you've been in the world. It's been about 5 years since I launched the good ship SS Tomorrow, and we're just catching up and asking how it's all progressing after that point of time, know where you see the world in 5 to 10 years' time. Our guest today is Nathan Rhodes from Intium. You might remember him from early in 2025, but we actually chatted to him in late 2024. It's been about a year since we chatted to him, and Nathan, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, David, and great to be with you again.
Yeah, my pleasure. Now, obviously, the first question is, in the past 12 months, the world has changed. What's been happening in Intium?
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. I think when you reflect on what's happened in the last 12 months, the energy industry, since we met, has gone through a lot of things have progressed. So, yeah, looking forward to chatting about that today.
Yeah, so let's...
Yeah, I can touch on some of those, Dave, absolutely. Yeah. I think since we last spoke, you can just simply see from media headlines alone that the energy sector really is getting more focused daily in Australia, and it's hard to go a day without hearing or seeing it being talked about in mainstream media. Networks. Yeah. But things like the setting of the National Emission Reductions Target Scheme from 62 to 70% by 2035. A lot of other announcements, Dave, around the 16 winners of Australia's biggest battery energy storage auctions, and also seen further expansion of the capacity investment schemes. So in summary, Dave, we're not short of headlines, and pretty safe to say that it's going to be some time before energy comes roaring again. But yeah, I do see that, Dave, as quite a positive sign that this energy transition and the topic of renewable energy is getting more airtime. And that's just not at a political level amongst the different parties, but also at community level, which is really important. So yeah, I think everyone's really leaning into that conversation in some different ways.
Yeah. And also September as well, I believe that it was the first time the renewables generated the likes of coal and gas.
That's correct. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So yeah, which is a really positive sign, isn't it? But I think in the last 12 months too, Dave, we've seen a lot of action starting to happen on the ground, which is terrific. Like just in Intium alone, we've moved a whole bunch of projects into construction. A lot more developers sort of post-selection are really getting on with things and looking for grid connection support and are getting projects developed and sort of navigating through those complexities. But yeah, there's quite a lot of projects that are coming to market, and not just in connections to grid, but also things like electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Particularly, we've been focused on the electrification of buses, which has been quite interesting in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did a bunch of research too, Dave, in the last 12 months. And yeah, particularly on, as I mentioned, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, but also connections of renewables. So that gives a whole bunch of really valuable insights to understand community and industry challenges and how we solve for those. But I can share just some real headlines around that.
Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think in the electric vehicle charging space, we surveyed over 300 Australian businesses, fleets with electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And some of those insights were like 2/3 of the business leaders expect EVs to form the majority of their fleet within 5 years, which was quite surprising, just that time frame. And they're definitely seeing some material savings when sort of adopting those fleets. And when you sort of roll that over a 5-year period, it sort of gets into millions of dollars for some of these major fleets, which is terrific. But yeah, I think 79% of the people that we sort of spoke to through that process, Dave, said they're cheaper to run, cheaper to maintain. Yeah, 53% of the market are sharing that view, which is, I think, again, some really good green shoots coming through that back in the research.
Yeah.
And still challenges, though, of course. Still challenges.
Yeah, of course, a lot of challenges, yeah.
Yeah, infrastructure rollouts and those sorts of things. But I think, it's good to identify those challenges and get the right experience around the table and the right level of collaboration, which is genuine and authentic. And we are seeing, again, as I mentioned before, some significant progress, particularly in the bus space and that sort of work. So, yeah, a lot of companies like ourselves and others and clients and some community groups have been getting on with some really important projects, which we can also talk about a bit more today.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so I've been excited about EVs. I just noticed you have done the news that BYD is launching a EV for about 25 grand, which is cheaper than most petrol cars. I think. Yeah, we've hit parity. I think that's quite exciting.
Yeah, it is, and I think we've obviously seen that in solar panels as well. And I think since we've spoken, Dave, think about battery, like the same amount of area that a battery took 12 months ago on the ground, we're now seeing a doubling of the energy stored on that same area. And battery costs are obviously probably going to, if not already, following the same cost trajectory of solar panels and electric cars, like you mentioned.
Yeah. And so what are some of the other challenges we're facing? I know there's been all systems go, but what's some of the challenges we're still facing out there?
Yeah, I think one of the key ones is infrastructure, as I mentioned, Dave. I think since we touched base last time, it's just been such an area of focus. But I sort of take quite a positive view that there is a whole host of infrastructure out there that's ready to support the transition right now. Yeah, I think Australia's making some considerable progress, which we might talk about later, but it's in unlocking that capacity on existing infrastructure, but particularly around the strong pipeline of projects. I think developers in particular are getting better line of sight and sort of an understanding of where they can connect to grids and where it makes sense from a timing and cost perspective. And yeah, we're seeing quite a lot of projects come to market. So that infrastructure piece is still challenging, but I think with the right sort of planning that's happening in the background and giving long-term visibility on and confidence on sort of investment settings and policy settings we're seeing a real sort of appetite to take on that challenge and a lot of fantastic plans to roll out the right amount of infrastructure to support that growth. Yeah.
And I guess the other big challenge too is basically the selling of the idea of a virtual power plant. I've read some articles. It's still quite a hard sell. Are you finding that out there in the community?
I think so. I can speak to that personally. I've been analysing that myself at a consumer level, and it's been quite an interesting experience from that consumer level. So yeah, I think there's some feedback we've provided in the media on that last week through different channels, even this week with the Energy Summit. So I think there are some challenges on VPP side of things that conceptually makes a lot of sense, but I think, again, the market will continue to innovate and collaborate with other parties and networks to bring that to life to make it quite a meaningful value proposition for consumers and communities more broadly.
Yeah. And also the main focus of our last chat, Nathan, was about having a regional jobs bonanza and renewable energy. Is that still on track?
Yeah, I'm feeling, again, very optimistic, Dave, around that opportunity from regional Australia. And I'm personally quite excited about it, having been from regional Australia. And I think the shift to renewable energy is creating significant job opportunities right across the regions and rural communities. And there's a whole host of infrastructure that's obviously being developed. And then you look at the timeframes, Dave, that's over the next decade, if not longer. Just to give you a very tangible example on a recent project that Intium's delivered. This was an interconnection of quite a major regional project in New South Wales, connecting to the national electricity market. And we're able to mobilise and develop a local regional New South Wales workforce and all the technicians working on this 330 kV high voltage infrastructure project and all the commissioning and testing that goes with that at the back end. All those people were from regional New South Wales in the local area. And we can see a whole host of projects in those areas where that workforce can obviously enjoy working on those sorts of projects for some time to come. So Yeah, it was terrific to see those local opportunities firstly present themselves, but that workforce has worked on some really exciting and technically challenging projects and did a great job and really delivered results for the client. So you sort of take a step back and look at that and how it stimulates like economies. And, it also, I know we're very focused on lifting local capability for the long term to create more regional jobs and build that capacity in the regions, because that pipeline of skills for the next 2 decades is going to be quite critical to transition. And we need to invest as early as we can in building that capacity. And we can clearly see, Dave, on projects to date, there's not enough capacity to deliver enough of the projects need to. So investing in that early is some really great initiatives to be playing across region New South Wales at the moment, where a lot of people are leaning into that to bring that to life, which gives that jobs bonanza sort of opportunity. I can speak from personal experience in the engineering space. So I was presented an opportunity from an engineering-based company in the regions, and it sort of led me into obviously an engineering career. Yeah, and I think it's also important to think about how we continue to give back to the regions and provide long-term benefits for the regions, but also balance that with the needs of long-term interests of consumers. And I think there's that regional jobs piece is I'm seeing it really come together. Some really meaningful and deep collaboration. I know my team's been out in Dubbo this week with the Energy Charter, talking about local engagement and how can we identify opportunities to provide long-term benefits to the regions, job, economic development, all those sorts of things. And I think there's maybe some elements we might touch on later, Dave, where you can see other industries now looking to come to the regions, not just for power projects, but for particularly where there's consumer energy resources or more community-based investments in the energy space. It opens up other opportunities for industries to develop in the regions and sort of long-term job creation, which I think that's such an exciting sort of value proposition for regional, rural and remote communities.
Yeah. What are some other industries that are basically taken on to the renewable energy space? Because they say, well, we've got next to cheap electricity and it's free and abundant.
Yeah, that's right. I think New South Wales government some time ago, and I had some involvement in it, was bringing in place special activation precincts, which were geared to create circular economies that really obviously tapped into benefits of local power availability, water, enabling infrastructure. So some really great investments made in some of these precincts. And Parks is an example of that we're working in at the moment, Dave, where there's some really interesting projects that obviously the power supply is really important to that area of Parks, but Parks in that precinct now is attracting industry in a whole different number of sectors, I would say. Manufacturing, there's recycling, that circular economy piece. A lot of companies there are really collaborating, Dave, on that circular economy piece where one company's output is an input to another company, and they can really drive efficiencies and help develop those companies and become a long-term job creation opportunities for the region. So there's some really interesting areas of region New South Wales that are leading from the front on this and tapping into the energy that's available, as we mentioned, Dave, but also top of mind is obviously thinking about long-term job creation and economic development, attracting investment into the regions, which is terrific.
Awesome. And what's next on the horizon? That's what's coming up for, say, 2026?
Yeah, great questions you've been posing across the board here, Dave. I don't know, we spoke about this last time, like how does the top-down or bottom-up approach, how's that going to play out in that sort of next 5-year to 10-year period, and even in the next 12 months, depending on how you look at it. I guess my perspective is on that over the next, say, let's talk about 5 years at least, we'll see a combination of multiple levels between a top-down. I think there's also a middle level, I'll speak about in a moment, and also a grassroots level from a bottom-up perspective. So just so I guess, in terms of speaking about that top-down piece is about large-scale strategic government and industry initiatives. Think of national renewable energy targets, large-scale transmission and significant policy frameworks. And when I talk about bottom-up, that's really around grassroots consumer-led change, market forces, and includes things like rooftop solar, residential battery storage, and sort of the rapid adoption of electric vehicles. So that's how that top-down and bottom-up approach are going to come together. It's going to be really interesting and really important data to obviously some data to support the energy transition. I really can see that there's also a middle layer. So I think and I've tried to use this analogy across the board, might try it again, Dave, if that's okay, around thinking about the local level as like local roads and how do we make that more efficient. If we do that, there's a lot of local benefit that can be enjoyed. So that's that community CER type level, community energy resources. You can just see the proliferation of rooftop solar and residential batteries and the electrification of homes and those sorts of things. You're already seeing the huge adoption of home batteries at the moment since the election's been quite phenomenal. But also in the middle level, there's, as we spoke about last time, there's some networks that have a lot of latent capacity in their infrastructure right now. So that's a fantastic source of infrastructure to tap into. I know I've been speaking with quite a lot of developers who are quite excited about that infrastructure that exists and the ability to connect into that to accelerate projects and generation projects and storage projects. So I call that middle level, where if you and I were sort of taking a step back, Dave, and looking at the energy transition, obviously we'd really promote that grassroots level, because there's been a really great adoption of a lot of the opportunities in that space. But also I think we focus quite heavily on how do we better utilise the infrastructure we've got, which I call that middle layer. So back to my road analogy, that's around sort of local or regional arterial type roads, making that road network more efficient to get more out of that infrastructure, which is quite an efficient way to obviously bring in those projects that are looking for a connection. And then obviously we've got a very large infrastructure that really, a lot of it connects up the states of Australia to form the national electricity market, Dave. So we get the grassroots level right, that middle level right, with a lot of that regional infrastructure. And then look at I call them the freeways in the road analogy. Like if we focus on that, so that's obviously such an important part of connecting up the states and those sorts of things to give the reliability and the ability to transfer bulk power when needed between the states. So that's obviously really important as well. But I feel if we get the grassroots level, the middle level to be as efficient as possible, and there's some real challenges in both of those levels, Dave, that the industry's working through right now, like, particularly from a ground up perspective, helping into some really interesting engineering problems to solve in that space to be able to, and lots of stakeholders involved, which is terrific. But, how do you control that energy, see that energy? How's the market going to respond in those settings? How does the network operator see all that energy coming in or going out? That's such an important part of the puzzle there, Dave, that grassroots level. But if we solve that level, we solve the middle layer, that's obviously going to right-size the amount of sort of top-down, that sort of freeway infrastructure, let's call it. And there won't be as many roads on the freeways up on the end of the analogy, Dave, just to give a sense of how we can drive that sort of efficient solution across those multiple levels.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of what the middle layer actually looks like? So I give my audience can really picture top down.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they go good grass to bottom up. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a network in New South Wales that has almost 9 gigawatts of lake capacity in what's called the sub-transmission networks. That's sort of 132 kV level. And that's been widely talked about in many circles. And so that infrastructure can connect in quite significant solar hybrid projects. So with batteries, standalone BESSs or battery energy systems is the acronym there. It can also bring in wind farms and quite sizable ones. And they're decent sized projects that work financially. They're not necessarily the mega projects per se, but there's a lot of benefits obviously with developing those scale of projects. So there's quite a lot of infrastructure there available to host those types of assets. Quite significant wind farms, quite significant batteries, and quite significant. We're not seeing a lot of pure solar anymore at the moment, but solar farms with obviously battery hybrids attached. So they're the type of assets that can connect in quite quickly now, because that infrastructure obviously exists. But obviously the market's seeing that. So I think the market's becoming more aware of those infrastructure opportunities in that middle layer, Dave, which I see as a really positive sign, because I think that'll help re-accelerate some of the key projects in its transition.
Yeah. And finally, Nathan, I'm really enjoying our catch up here. Skip forward to, say, 2035, we've met the target. How you envision the world from that point onwards?
Yeah, it's fun to sort of cast your mind that far forward, isn't it? And really think that from a futurist perspective, what could that world look like? And I think, and maybe those three sort of levels that I spoke about, Dave, is we get to 2035 and all celebrate the success of getting there. But if we get those three levels to work together really efficiently, I think that gives us a great option to get there. So in that scenario, we'd see fantastic suite of consumer energy resources at the local level. We'd see in the middle level a nice suite of infrastructure that's been efficiently rolled out in terms of storage and wind. And obviously we'd have the transmission infrastructure and projects also connecting at that level, playing out as well. And depending how that sort of goes, obviously there may be some other energy and type sources that need to come in case sort of things play out. But the transition fuels one that's often discussed at the moment. But by 2035, sort of 10 years from now, I think depending on how that plays out from a development perspective, we could see some really interesting project brought to market. And I think the policy settings that we spoke about before, we are seeing now that top-down policy can really help accelerate bottom-up innovation. So government incentives for rooftop and batteries and that bottom-up adoption can obviously inform the drive and need for the top-down infrastructure. So that interplay between different policy settings and creating that sort of there's very significant policy frameworks that investors are looking for. Is obviously really important. I do expect also in 2035, they will have lots of a really nice blend of international and domestic investors that have come together to help develop these projects. So that's obviously a full benefit to Australia, bringing that capital in from offshore to help fund a lot of these projects. And yeah, we're seeing that now, a lot of really genuine international organisations, but they're very acutely aware that they also need to understand local conditions of developing projects in regional New South Wales and bringing that global innovation. So we're seeing a lot of innovation, well, Dave, we're bringing it to bear in the market we spoke about last time. And so in 10 years from now, I expect to see a lot of that innovation become business as usual for projects, a lot more efficiency, a lot more modular construction, a lot more sort of one I've been looking at recently with the Intium team is flexible exports, for example. So that's where if there's capacity on the grid, people who have their connections from residential up to industrial can obviously either import or export depending on where the grid's at any point in time. So that's quite a smart grid. So 10 years from now, I'm expecting those sorts of technologies to be sort of rather normal. And obviously consumers and industry groups are obviously enjoying the benefits of some of those quite clever systems that can interface with the grid and drive better value.
Yeah. I actually do think we are becoming we should be a renewable energy superpower really in international markets. I think in the terms of electrostate, it's quite exciting if we actually can produce more enough for ourselves and then export it, say, to Singapore or Malaysia, or some of our nearest neighbours. That'd be quite exciting and good source of foreign revenue.
Yeah, we've obviously quite blessed in Australia with done a lot of wind and ability to store. Yeah, I think storage has, since we met Dave, obviously, just in the last 12 months, the amount of energy storage projects that have come to market, and Intium's working on those right now. It's been quite an uplift. Having the ability to bring those sorts of investors in from offshore right now, like we're seeing that happen right now, Dave, and there's a lot of excitement around that as well. So data centers is another one that's often spoken about. You're starting to see some quite big muscle movements in the industry and a lot of companies coming into Australia, which is obviously can provide a lot of benefit if it's done in the right way.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Nathan, it's great catching up with you. And for those who did miss out last time, where else can we find you?
Yes, probably the best place to find us is on Intium's website. We've also got a presence on LinkedIn. So Intium, as it's spelled Intium. So if you pop that into web browsers, you can find us.
Fantastic. As always, make sure those in the show notes. Nathan, it's great catch up with you, mate. And let's catch up in a few years' time and see how it's all progressing.
Yeah, look forward to it, Dave. And thank you for having me today. It's been great to spend some time with you.
Pleasure's all mine. And thank you, Nathan, for his input. And once again, thank you for the awesome team at Sling & Stone. You guys are wonderful. You always give me some excellent guests, and I always love doing a shout out to you. Gratitude's a wonderful thing. Now, next time here on board the good ship SS Tomorrow, a slight sidestep, we are going to discuss the importance of having human-to-human development in technological adoption. Applying a bit of holistic view, a bit of some bit of digital wisdom. I'm not going to give away the game, but that's coming up next time. Very interested, particularly if you're running a startup or you're about to launch a startup. I do recommend you actually have a good listen to it. It's coming up next time here on The Friendly Futurist. Thank you for listening. The Friendly Futurist is a Podcast West production and has been produced and edited by me, Dave Munn. If you love this show, please leave us a 5-star review on your favourite platform. That way it can help me grow. Until next time, friends, remember to stay curious and the future is user-friendly.
Another Podcasts West production.
This podcast is just for educational purposes and it's not financial advice. I'm not a financial planner or advisor. Please do your homework and seek professional help before you take on any adventures.